Hare Krishna, my dear devotees, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Today we're hearing from Canto 3, Chapter 29, and verse number 2. Which should be verse number
1 and 2.
1 and 2. Yeah, sorry, 1 and 2. And it says, Devahuti inquired, "My dear Lord, you have already very scientifically describe the symptoms of the total material nature and the characteristics of the spirit according to the Sankhya system of philosophy. Now I shall request you to explain the path of devotional service, which is the ultimate end of all philosophical symptoms." Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this 29th chapter, the glories of devotional service are elaborately explained, and the influence of time on the conditioned soul is also described. The purpose of elaborately describing the influence of time is to detach the conditioned soul from his material activities, which are considered to be simply a waste of time. In the previous chapter, material nature, the spirit, and the Supreme Lord or Super Soul are analytically studied. And in this chapter, the principles of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service, the execution of activities in the eternal relationship between the living entities and the personality of Godhead, are explained. Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, is the basic principle of all symptoms of philosophy. All philosophy which does not aim for devotional service to the Lord is considered merely mental speculation. But of course, Bhakti Yoga with no philosophical basis is more or less sentiment. There are two classes of men. Some consider themselves intellectually advanced and simply speculate and meditate, and others are sentimental and have no philosophical basis for their propositions. Neither of these can advance the highest goal of life, or if they do, it will take them many, many years. Vedic literature therefore suggests that there are three elements, namely the Supreme Lord, the living entity, and their eternal relationship. And the goal of life is to follow the principles of bhakti or devotional service, and ultimately attain to the planet of the Supreme Lord in full devotion and love as an eternal servitor of the Lord. Sankhya philosophy is the analytical study of all existence. One has to understand everything by examining its nature and characteristics. This is called acquirement of knowledge. But one should not simply acquire knowledge without reaching the goal of life or the basic principle for acquiring knowledge, Bhakti Yoga. If we give up Bhakti Yoga and simply busy ourselves in the analytical study of the nature of things as they are, then the result will be practically nil. In other words, useless. It is stated in the Bhagavatam that such engagement is something like husking a paddy. There is no use beating the husk if the grain has already been removed. By the scientific study of material nature, the living entity and the supersoul, one has to understand the basic principle of devotional service to the Lord. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Text number 3. Devahuti continued, my dear Lord, please also describe in detail, both for me and for people in general, the continual process of birth and death. For by hearing of such calamities, we may become detached from the activities of this material world. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, the word samsriti is very important. Shreya Shruti means the prosperous path of advancement towards the Supreme Personality of God. And samsmriti means the continued journey on the path of birth and death towards the darkest region of material existence. People who have no knowledge of this material world, God, and their actual intimate relationship with Him are actually going to the darkest region of material existence in the name of progress, in this material advancement of civilization. To enter the darkest region of material existence means to enter into a species of life other than the human species. Ignorant men do not know that after this life, they are completely under the grip of material nature and will be offered a life which they are completely under the grip of material nature and will be offered a life which may not be very congenial. How a living entity gets different kinds of bodies will be explained in the next chapter. This continual change of bodies in birth and death is called samsara. Devahuti requests her glorious son, Kapila Muni, to explain about this continual journey to impress upon the conditioned souls that they are undergoing a path of degradation by not understanding the path of bhakti yoga or devotional service. Section number 4. Please also describe eternal time, which is a representation of your form and by whose influence people in general engage in the performance of pious activities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. However ignorant one may be regarding the path of good fortune and the path down to the darkest region of ignorance, everyone is aware of the influence of eternal time, which devours all the effects of our material activities. The body is born at a certain time, and immediately the influence of time acts upon it. From the date of the birth of the body, the influence of death is also acting. The advancement of age entails the influence of time on the body. If a man is 30 or 50 years old, then the influence of time has already devoured 30 or 50 years of the duration of his life. Everyone is everyone is conscious of the last stage of life when he will meet the cruel hands of death. But some consider their age and circumstances, concern themselves with the influence of time, and thus engage in pious activities so that in the future they will not be put into a low family or an animal species. Generally, people are attached to sense enjoyment and so aspire for life on the heavenly planets. Therefore, they engage themselves in charitable or other pious activities, but actually, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, one cannot get relief from the chain of birth and death, even if he goes to the highest planet, Ramaloka, because the influence of time is present everywhere within this material world. In the spiritual world, however, the time factor has no influence. Well, that's good news. You can go to the spiritual world, there's no influence of the time factor. Text number 5. My dear Lord, you are just like the sun, for you illuminate the darkness of the conditional life of living entities. Because their eyes of knowledge are not open, they are sleeping eternally in that darkness without your shelter, and therefore they are falsely engaged by the action and reactions of their material activities, and they appear to be very fatigued. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It appears that Srimati Devahuti, the glorious mother of Lord Kapila Deva, is very compassionate for the regrettable condition of people in general, who, not knowing the goal of life, are sleeping in the darkness of illusion. It is the general feeling of the Vaishnava, or devotee of the Lord, that he should awaken them. Similarly, Devahuti is requesting her glorious son to illuminate the lives of the conditioned souls so that their most regrettable conditional life may be ended. The Lord is described herein as Yoga Bhaskara, the son of the system of all yogis. Devahuti has already requested the glorious son to describe Bhakti Yoga, and the Lord has described Bhakti Yoga as the ultimate yoga system. Bhakti Yoga is the sun-like illumination of delivering the conditioned souls, whose general condition is described here. They have no eyes to see their own interests. They do not know that the goal of life is not to increase the material necessities of existence, because the body will not exist more than a few years. The living beings are eternal, and they have their eternal need. If one engages only in caring for the necessities of the body, not caring for the eternal necessities of life, then he is part of a civilization whose advancement puts living entities in the darkest region of ignorance. Sleeping in that darkest region, one does not get any refreshment, but rather gradually becomes fatigued. He invents many processes to adjust this fatigue condition, but he fails and thus remains confused. The only path for mitigating this fatigue in the struggle for existence is the path of devotional service, or the path of Krishna consciousness. Text number 6. Sri Maitreya said, O best amongst the crews, the great sage Kapila, moved by great compassion and pleased by the words of his glorious mother, spoke as follows. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Kapila was very satisfied by the request of his glorious mother because she was thinking not only in terms of her personal salvation, but in terms of all the fallen conditioned souls. The Lord is always compassionate towards the fallen souls of this material world, and therefore he comes himself or sends his confidential servants to deliver them. Since he is perpetually compassionate towards them, if some of his devotees also become compassionate towards him, he is very pleased with the devotees. In Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that persons who are trying to elevate the condition of the fallen souls by preaching the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, namely full surrender unto the personality of Godhead, are very dear to him. Thus, when the Lord saw that his beloved mother was very compassionate towards the fallen souls, he was pleased, and he also became compassionate towards her. Text number 7. Lord Kapila, the personality of Godhead, replied, O noble lady, there are multifarious paths of devotional service in terms of the different qualities of the executor. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness is one, because in pure devotional service, there is no demand from the devotee to be fulfilled by the Lord. But generally, people take the devotional service with a purpose. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, people who are not purified take the devotional service with 4 purposes. A person who is distressed because of material conditions becomes a devotee of the Lord and approaches the Lord for mitigation of his distress. A person in need of money approaches the Lord to ask for some improvement in his monetary condition. Others who are not in distress or in need of money assistance, but are seeking knowledge in order to understand absolute truth, also take the devotional service, and they inquire into the nature of the Supreme Lord. This is very nicely described in Bhagavad Gita 7.16. Actually, the path of devotional service is one without a second, but according to the devotee's condition, devotional service appears in multifarious varieties, as will be nicely explained in the following verse. Text number 8. Devotional service executed by a person who is envious, proud, violent, and angry, and who is a separatist, is considered to be in a mode of darkness. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It has already been stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, that the highest, most glorious religion is the attainment of causeless, unmotivated devotional service. In pure devotional service, the only motive should be to please the Supreme Personality of God. That is not actually a motive. That is the pure condition of the living entity. In the conditioned stage, when one engages in devotional service, he should follow the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master in full surrender. The spiritual master is the manifested representation of the Supreme Lord because he receives and presents instructions to the Lord as they are. By disciplic succession, it is described in Bhagavad Gita that the teachings therein should be received by disciplic success. Otherwise, there is adulteration. To act under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master with the motive to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pure devotional service. But if one has a motive for personal sense gratification, his devotional service is manifested differently. Such a man may be violent, proud, envious, and angry, and his interests are separate from the Lord's. One who approaches the Supreme Lord to render devotional service, but who is proud of his personality, envious of others, or vengeful, is in the mode of anger. He thinks that he is the best devotee. Devotional service executed in this way is not pure. It is mixed and is of the lowest grade. Tamasa. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur advises that a Vaishnava who is not of good character should be avoided. A Vaishnava is one who has taken the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the ultimate goal of life. But if one is not pure and still has motives, then he is not a Vaishnava of the first order of good character. One may offer his respects to such a Vaishnava because he has accepted the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of life, but one should not keep company with a Vaishnava who is in a mode of ignorance. The worship of devotees in the temple by a separatist with a motive for material enjoyment, fame, and opulence is devotion in the mode of passion. Let me read that again. The worship of deities in the temple by a separatist with a motive for material enjoyment, fame, and opulence is devotion in the mode of passion. Very important verse. Purport. The word separatist must be understood carefully. The Sanskrit words in this connection are Vina Drik and Pritak Bhava. A separatist is one who sees his interest as separate from that of the Supreme Lord. Mixed devotees, or devotees in the mode of passion and ignorance, think that the interest of the Supreme Lord is supplying the orders of the devotee. The interest of such devotees is to draw from the Lord as much as possible for their sense gratification. This is the separatist mentality. Actually, pure devotion is explained in the previous chapter. The mind of the Supreme Lord and the mind of the devotee should be dovetailed. In other words, connected. A devotee should not wish anything but to execute the desire of the Supreme. That is oneness. When the devotee has an interest or will differ from the interest of the Supreme Lord, his mentality is that of a separatist. When the so-called devotee desires material enjoyment without reference to the interests of the Supreme Lord, or he wants to become famous or opulent by utilizing the money or grace of the Supreme Lord, he is in the mode of passion. Mayavadis, however, interpret this word separatist in a different way. They say that while worshiping the Lord, one should think himself one with the Supreme Lord. This is another adulterated form of devotion within the modes of material nature. The conception that the living entity is one with the Supreme is in the mode of ignorance. Oneness is actually based on oneness of interest. A pure devotee has no interest but to act on behalf of the Supreme Lord. When one has even a tinge of personal interest, his devotion is mixed with the three modes of material nature. Very good point. When a devotee worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead and offers the results of his activities in order to free himself from the inebrities of fruitive activity, inebrities means the intoxication of fruitive activities, his devotion is in the mode of goodness. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, along with the Brahmacharis, Grihastas, Manaprasthas, and Sannyasis, are the members of the 8 divisions of Varnas and Ashramas, and they have their respective duties to perform for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When such activities are performed and the results are offered to the Supreme Lord, they are called karmarpanam, duties performed for the satisfaction of the Lord. If there is any inebriety, meaning intoxication, or fault, it is atoned for by this offering process. But if this offering process is in a mode of goodness rather than in pure devotion, then the interest is different. The 4 ashramas and the 4 varnas act for some benefit in accordance with their personal interests. Therefore, such activities are in the mode of goodness. They cannot be counted in the category of pure devotion. Pure devotional service, as described by Rupa Goswami, is free from all material desires. Anya vilasita sunyam. There can be no excuse for personal or material interest. Devotional activities should be transcendental to fructify activities and empiric philosophical speculation. I'm sorry. Let's read that again. There can be no excuse for personal or material interest. Devotional activities should be transcendental to fruitive activities, right? Fruitive activities and empiric philosophical speculation. Pure devotional service is transcendental to all material qualities. Devotional service in the modes of ignorance, passion, and goodness can be divided into 81 categories. There are different devotional activities, such as hearing, chanting, remembering, worshiping, offering prayers, rendering service, and surrendering everything. And each of them can be divided into 3 qualitative categories. There is hearing in the mode of passion, in the mode of ignorance, and in the mode of goodness. Similarly, there is chanting in the mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness, etc. 3 multiplied by 9 equals 27. And when again multiplied by 3, it becomes 81. One has to transcend all such mixed materialistic devotional service in order to reach the standard of pure devotional service. Very nice statement. The manifestation of the unadulterated devotional service is exhibited when one's mind is at once attracted to hearing the transcendental name and qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is residing in everyone's heart, just as the water of the Ganges flows naturally down towards the ocean. Such devotional ecstasy, uninterrupted by any material condition, flows toward the Supreme Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The basic principle of this unadulterated, pure devotional service is love of God. Mad Guna Shruti Matrina means just after hearing about the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These qualities are called Nirguna. The Supreme Lord is uncontaminated by the modes of material nature. Therefore, he is attractive to the pure devotee. There is no need to practice meditation to attain such attraction. The pure devotee is already in the transcendental stage, and the affinity between him and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is natural and is compared to the Ganges water flowing towards the ocean. The flow of the Ganges water cannot be stopped by any condition. Similarly, a pure devotee's attraction for the transcendental name, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Godhead cannot be stopped by any material condition. The word avichinna, without interruptions, is very important in this connection. No material condition can stop the flow of the devotional service of a pure devotee. The word ahaituki means without reason. A pure devotee does not render loving service to the Personality of Godhead for any cause or for any benefit, material or spiritual. This is the first symptom of an unavoided devotion. Anya bilasita sunyam. He has no desire to fulfill by rendering devotional service. Such devotional service is meant for the Purushottama, the Supreme Personality, and not for anyone else. Sometimes pseudo-devotees show devotion to many demigods, thinking the forms of demigods to be the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead's form. It is specifically mentioned herein, however, that bhakti, devotional service, is meant only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, Vishnu, or Krishna, not for anyone else. Avyahita means without cessation. A pure devotee must engage in the service of the Lord 24 hours a day without cessation. His life is so molded that at every minute and every second he engages in some sort of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Another meaning of the word avyavahita is that the interest of the devotee and the interest of the Supreme Lord are on the same level. The devotee has no interest but to fulfill the transcendental desire of the Supreme Lord. Such spontaneous service unto the Supreme Lord is transcendental and is never contaminated by the material modes of nature. These are the symptoms of pure devotional service, which is free from all contamination of material nature. Text 13. The pure devotee does not accept any kind of liberation. Salukya, Shastri, Samithya, Sarupya, or Ekatva, even though they are offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Chaitanya teaches us how to execute pure devotional service out of spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Sikshastaka, he prays to the Lord, O Lord, I do not wish to gain from you any wealth, nor do I wish to have a beautiful wife, nor do I wish to have many followers. All I want from you is that in life, after life, I may remain a pure devotee at your lotus feet. There is a similarity between the prayers of Lord Chaitanya and the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya prays in life after life, indicating that a devotee does not even desire the cessation of birth and death. The yogis and empiric philosophers desire cessation of the process of birth and death, but a devotee is satisfied to remain even in this material world and execute devotional service. It is clearly stated here that a pure devotee does not desire ekatva, oneness with the Supreme Lord, as desired by the impersonalists, the mental speculators, and the meditators. To become one with the Supreme Lord is beyond the dream of a pure devotee. Sometimes he may accept promotion to the Vaikuntha planets to serve the Lord there, but he will never accept merging into the Brahman effulgence, which he considers worse than hellish. Why is that? Because the only place where there's no devotional service is in the Brahman effulgence. There's service in hell, and there's service in devotional service in the this devotional service in heaven, but there's no devotional service in the Brahman effulgence. Such a katva, or merging into the effulgence of the Supreme Lord, is called kaivalya, but the happiness derived from kaivalya is considered by the pure devotee to be hellish. The devotee is so fond of rendering service to the Supreme Lord that the 5 kinds of liberation are not important to him. If one is engaged in pure, transcendental, loving service to the Lord, it is understood that he has already achieved the 5 kinds of liberation. When a devotee is promoted to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, he receives 4 kinds of facilities. One of these is Salokya, living on the same planet as the Supreme Personality. The Supreme Lord, in his different plenary expansions, lives on innumerable Vaikuntha planets, and the chief planet is Krishna Loka. Just as within the material universe, the chief planet is the sun. In the spiritual world, the chief planet is Krishna Loka. From Krishna Loka, the bodily effulgence of Lord Krishna is distributed, not only to the spiritual world, but to the material world as well. It is covered by matter, however, in the material world. In the spiritual world, there are innumerable Vaikuntha planets, and on each one, the Lord is the predominating deity. A devotee can be promoted to one such Vaikuntha planet to live with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Shasti liberation, the opulence of the devotee is equal to the opulence of the Supreme Lord. Samipya means to be a personal associate of the Supreme Lord. In Sarupya liberation, the bodily features of the devotee are exactly like those of the Supreme Person, but for 2 or 3 symptoms found exclusively on the transcendental body of the Lord. Shivatsa, for example, the hair on the chest of the Lord, particularly distinguishes him from his devotees. A pure devotee does not accept these 5 kinds of spiritual existence, even if they are offered, and he certainly does not hanker after material benefits, which are all insignificant in comparison with spiritual benefits. When Prahlad Maharaj was offered some material benefit, he said, "My Lord, I have seen that my father achieved all kinds of material benefits, and even the demigods were afraid of his opulence. But still, in a second, you have finished his life and all his material prosperity. For a devotee, there's no question of desiring any material or spiritual prosperity. He simply aspires to serve the Lord. That is his highest happiness. Text number 14. By attaining the highest platform of devotional service, as I have explained, one can overcome the influence of the three modes of material nature and be situated in the transcendental stage, as is the Lord. Purport. Sripada Sankaracharya, who is supposed to be the leader of the impersonal school of philosophers, has admitted in the beginning of his comments on Bhagavad Gita that Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is beyond the material creation. Except for him, everything is within the material creation. It is also condemned in the Vedic literature that before the creation, it was only Narayana. Neither Lord Brahma nor Lord Shiva existed. Only Narayana, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vishnu, or Krishna, is always in a transcendental position beyond the influence of material creation. The material qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance cannot affect the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he is called Nirguna, free from all tinges of material qualities. Here, the same fact is confirmed by Lord Kapila. One who is situated in pure devotional service is transcendentally situated, as is the Lord. Lust, just as the Lord is unaffected by the influence of the material modes, so too are the pure devotees. One who is not affected by the three modes of material nature is called a liberated soul, or Brahmabhuta soul. Brahmabhuta Prasanatma is the stage of liberation. Aham Brahmasmi, I am not this body. This is applicable only to the person who constantly engages in the devotional service of Krishna and is thus in the transcendental stage. He is above the influence of the three modes of material nature. It is the misconception of impersonals that one can worship any imaginary form of the Lord or Brahman and at the end merge in the Brahman effulgence. Of course, to merge into the bodily effulgence Brahman of the Supreme Lord is also liberation, as explained in the previous verse. Ekatva is also liberation, but that sort of liberation is never accepted by any devotee, for qualitative oneness is immediately attained as soon as one is situated in devotional service. For a devotee, the qualitative equality, which is the result of impersonal liberation, is already attained. He does not have to try for it separately. It is clearly stated here that simply by pure devotional service, one becomes qualitatively as good as the Supreme Lord himself. Okay, so that's an interesting statement. When the devotees engage in pure devotional service, he has what's called qualitative equality, which is the result of impersonal liberation, has already attained. He does not have to try for it separately. It is clearly stated here that simply by pure devotional service, one becomes qualitatively as good as the Lord himself. Of course, he doesn't become the Lord, but he has a qualitative goodness But that doesn't mean that he's equal to the Lord. He is on the level of the Lord. That means that he's in transcendental goodness, but he's still the servant of the Lord. Text 15. A devotee must execute his prescribed duties, which are glorious, without material profit, without excessive violence. One should regularly perform one's devotional activities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. One has to execute his prescribed duties according to his social position as a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra. The prescribed duties of the four classes of men in human society are also described in Bhagavad Gita. The activities of Brahmanas are to control the senses and to become simple, clean, learned devotees. The Kshatriyas have the spirit for ruling. They are not afraid on a battlefield, and they are charitable. The Vaishyas, or an mercantile class of men, trade in commodities, protect cows, and develop agricultural produce. The Sudras are labor class, serve the higher classes because they themselves are not very intelligent. You notice he didn't mention that they are anybody who is a sense gratifier, and is engaged in all kinds of activities that are sinful. From every position, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Swakarmana tam abhyarcha, one can serve the Supreme Lord by performing one's prescribed duty. It is not that only the Brahmanas can serve the Supreme Lord and not the Sudras. Anyone can serve the Supreme Lord by performing his prescribed duties under the direction of a spiritual master or a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one should think that his prescribed duties are inferior. A Brahmana can serve the Lord by using his intelligence, and the Kshatriya can serve the Supreme Lord by using his military arts, just as Arjuna served Krishna. Arjuna was a warrior. He had no time to study Vedanta or other highly intellectual books. The damsels in Vrajadama were girls born of the Vaishya class, and they engaged in protecting cows and producing agriculture. Krishna's foster father, Nanda Maharaj, and his associates were all Vaishyas. They were not at all educated, but they could serve Krishna by loving him and by offering everything to him. Similarly, there are many instances in which Chandalas, or lower than Sudras, have served Krishna. Also, the sage Vidura was considered a Sudra because his mother happened to be Sudra. There are no distinctions, for it is declared by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita that anyone engaged specifically in devotional service is elevated to the transcendental position without a doubt. Everyone's prescribed duty is glorious if it is performed in devotional service of the Lord without desire for profit. Such loving service must be performed without reason, without impediment, and spontaneously. Krishna is lovable, and one has to serve him in what other capacity one can. That is pure devotional service. Another significant phrase in this verse is Nati Himsarena, with minimum violence or sacrifice of life. Even if a devotee has to commit violence, it should not be done beyond what is necessary. Sometimes the question is put before us. You ask us not to eat meat, but you are eating vegetables. Do you think that is not violence? The answer is that eating vegetables is violence, and vegetarians are also committing violence against other living entities because vegetables also have life. Non-devotees are killing cows, goats, and so many other animals for eating purposes. And the devotee who is vegetarian is also killing. But here, significantly, it is stated that even living entity has to live by killing another entity. That is the law of nature. Jivo jivasya jivanam. One living entity is the life for another living entity. But for a human being, that violence should be committed only as much as necessary. A human being is not to eat anything which is not offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yajna sista sina santa. One becomes freed from all sinful reactions by eating foodstuffs which are offered to Yajna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A devotee, therefore, eats only prasada, or foodstuffs offered to the Supreme Lord. And Krishna says that when a devotee offers him foodstuffs from the vegetable kingdom, with devotion, he eats that. A devotee is to offer to Krishna foodstuffs prepared from vegetables. If the Supreme Lord wanted foodstuffs prepared from animal food, the devotee could offer this, but he does not order. But he is not order to do that. He does, but he does not order to do that. We have to commit violence. That is a natural law. We should not, however, commit violence extravagantly, but only as much as ordered by the Lord. Arjuna engaged in the art of killing, and although killing is, of course, violence, he killed the enemy simply on the order of Krishna, simply on Krishna's order. In the same way, if we commit violence as it is necessary by the order of the Lord, that is called nati himsa. We cannot avoid violence, for we are put into a conditional life in which we have to commit violence, but we should not commit more violence than necessary or than ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The devotee should regularly see my statuses in the temple, touch my lotus feet, and offer worshipful paraphernalia and prayer. He should see in the spirit of renunciation from the mode of goodness and see every living entity as spiritual. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Temple worship is one of the duties of a devotee. It is especially recommended for neophytes, but those who are advanced should not refrain from temple worship. There is a distinction in the manner a neophyte and an advanced devotee appreciate the Lord's presence in the temple. A neophyte considers the Archa Vigraha, the statue of the Lord, to be different from the original personality of God. He considers it a representation of the Supreme Lord in the form of a deity. But an advanced devotee accepts the deity in the temple as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He does not see any difference between the original form of the Lord and the statue or archa form of the Lord in the temple. This is the vision of a devotee whose devotional service is in the highest stage of bhava, or love of Godhead. Whereas a neophyte's worship in the temple is a matter of routine duty. Temple worship is one of the functions of a devotee. He goes regularly to see the deity nicely decorated, and with veneration and respect, he touches the lotus feet of the Lord and presents offerings of worship, such as fruits, flowers, and prayers. At the same time, to advance in devotional service, a devotee should see other living entities as spiritual sparks, parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. A devotee is to offer respect to every entity that has a relationship with the Lord, because every living entity originally has a relationship with the Lord as part and parcel. A devotee should try to see all living entities on the same equal level of spiritual existence. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, a pandita, one who is learned, sees equally a very learned brahmana, a sudra, a hog, a dog, and a cow. He does not see the body, which is only an outward dress. He does not see the dress of a brahmana or that of a cow or of a hog. He sees the spiritual spark, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. If a devotee does not see every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, he is considered prakrita bhakta, or a materialistic devotee. He is not completely situated on the spiritual platform. Rather, he is in the lowest stage of devotion. He does, however, show all respect to the deity. Although a devotee sees all living entities on the level of spiritual existence, he is not interested in associating with everyone. Simply because a tiger is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord does not mean that we embrace him because of his spiritual relationship with the Supreme Lord. We must associate only with persons who have developed Krishna consciousness. We should befriend and offer special respect to persons who are developed in Krishna consciousness. Other living entities are ultimately part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but because their consciousness is still covered and not developed in Krishna consciousness, we should renounce their association. It is said by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that even if one is a Vaishnava, if he is offered the respect of a Vaishnava, although he may be offered the respect of a Vaishnava, anyone who accepts Vishnu as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is accepted as a Vaishnava. But a Vaishnava is expected to develop all the good qualities of the demigods. The exact meaning of the word Satvena is given by Sridhar Swami as being synonymous with Dhairyena, or patience. One must perform devotional service with great patience. One should not give up the execution of devotional service because one or two attempts have not been successful. One must continue. Srila Rupa Goswami also confirms that one should be very enthusiastic and execute devotional service with patience and confidence. Patience is necessary for developing the confidence that Krishna will certainly accept me because I am engaging in devotional service. One has only to execute service according to the rules and regulations to ensure success. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Okay, we will stop there and pick up on text 17 tomorrow. Are there any questions? So many nice things in all these verses, just amazing. So let's see. One of the takeaways today is Although a devotee sees all living entities on a level of spiritual existence, he is not interested in associating with everyone. Simply because a tiger is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord does not mean that we embrace him because of his spiritual relationship with the Supreme Lord. We must associate only with persons who have developed Krishna consciousness. A very good statement by Prabhupada. We should befriend and offer special respect to persons who are developed in Krishna consciousness. Other living entities are undoubtedly part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but because their consciousness is still covered and not developed in Krishna consciousness, we should renounce their association. Vishwanath, it is said by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that even if one is a Vaishnava, if he is offered the respect, if he is not of good character, his company should be avoided, although he may be offered the respect of a Vaishnava. Anyone who accepts Krishna as the Supreme Personality is accepted as a Vaishnava, but a Vaishnava is expected to develop all the good qualities of the demigods. Harivilas. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions or comments? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada makes everything crystal clear. And no doubts.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes, Haribol.
Haribol. I have an observation. So as you said that as a devotee, we should not associate with the non-Krishna conscious people. What I observed in my life is after coming to Krishna consciousness, those non-Krishna conscious friends of mine are not even interested in talking to me. So I think it's
You're very fortunate.
I think it's a Krishna arrangement.
Yeah. Well, you have to think, why is it that they're not even talking to you?
Because I'm not interested now in conversation which we used to do before, and the food, like, because we don't eat now onion garlic food or non-offered food, so the food is an issue because they cannot offer me anything, and beverages like caffeine that we used to drink together while chit-chatting, now I'm not interested in that. I cannot drink that. So they think that there is no point of connection between us. So now they are not much interested in calling us or talking to us. So I take it as a Krishna's arrangement that good, I don't have to do any effort to tell them. No.
Yeah, and it's strange. It's strange, isn't it, that
Yeah.
they consider friendship on the basis of nonsensical criteria.
Yes.
So yeah, and it's good that they avoid you. That way, you don't have to. You're not obliged to do to them for doing anything.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, when I became Krishna conscious, I had one uncle who was very, very, let's say, he was a maniac, and he got really upset when I became a devotee, and he tried to force me to eat meat. and you know, do things that I was doing before I became a devotee. And he tried to force me to do those things again, and I refused, and he got really angry. And when I offered him some prasadam, I brought some prasadam with me. I offered him prasadam, he refused to eat it.
He refused?
He refused. Yeah, he was angry. He said, yeah, I'll only eat it if you eat what I eat.
Hmm.
And I said, no, I can't do that. So then he refused to have any prasadam. What happened to him? I think 2 years later, he died. So there are people that, you know, it's almost impossible for them to become Krishna conscious. So I offered him some prasadam. I bought prasadam with him. He refused it. He said, you ate my food, then I might eat your food. Harivilas. Okay, of course, Srila Prabhupada. Yeah. Thank you very much. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And don't be intimidated by family members or friends or whatever. Just be on the straight and narrow path of Krishna consciousness. Hare Bol.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.